Hi, it's Scott, ROCKFILE, back with another podcast review for you. Going to be talking about the 1988 film Dead Heat and its, well, fairly recent 4K release. The short version is, this is a little-known horror comedy from 1988 that didn't make its budget back. It's got Vincent Price in it, Darren McGavin, Shane Black's got a small role, Treat Williams, and Joe Piscopo star. If that gives you any indication. It was the director's first movie, but he worked on things like The Terminator, and I found it to be surprisingly better than I remembered it. Short version is, if you think you're going to like a horror comedy in the vein of something like an Evil Dead, but not quite a Sam Raimi flick, check it out. Dead Heat. It's available now on Blu-ray and 4K from Behringer Syndrome. They are a small boutique label that puts out a lot of B movies, horror movies, some adult flicks, things like that, and they're now releasing 4Ks. The movie is basically a buddy cop movie. It's a play on The Dead or Alive, DOA, the original 40s movie and the remake. But the twist is he's not poisoned, he's dying and falling apart. I don't want to give too many spoilers if you've never seen the movie, but it's a buddy cop movie where Treat Williams and Joe Piscopo come upon some bad guys that they shoot about 100 times and they don't go down. So they investigate more, and the more they get involved, the weirder it gets. It's funny. Sometimes unintentionally, sometimes intentionally. I would say most of the time it's intentional. It does have a nice layer of 80s cheese from some of the music to a lot of the Joe Piscopo lines that were ad-libbed on the set. But all in all, this was something I picked up cheap from Hamilton Book. I've mentioned this site before. You can get cheap movies, books, and CDs from that website. Very, very, very cheap with a flat rate shipping. Not giving them a commercial, just saying you should check it out. Not going to find a whole lot of stuff you like, but what you do find is going to be the lowest price. It's cheaper than Amazon, cheaper than Best Buy, cheaper than Walmart, right? So anyway, this has been one of those movies I would never pay $35 to $40 is what a boutique label wants for a 4K like this. I just wouldn't. This is not one of those movies. I think I had it on VHS, maybe a DVD. I don't think it's ever been out on Blu-ray before. But it was on Hamilton Book. The price was right. It's been sitting on my shelf for weeks. And I was like, okay, it's time. Time for something a little nostalgic. So to get into it, like I said, the short version is if you think you'll like it, watch it. I'd give it maybe a 3 out of 5, maybe a 2.5 to a 3 out of 5. 6 out of 10 on IMDb. 87% of Google users use it. Rotten Tomatoes is 11%, and Letterboxd is 3 out of 5. It was a $5 million budgeted film that made about $3.5 million from New World Pictures back in the day. Joe Piscopo's okay in the movie. Treat Williams is really good in the movie. Vincent Price was really good. Darren McGavin was really good. Lindsay Frost, really good, if you remember her. And Shane Black, who went on to write Lethal Weapon and direct some movies. He's actually pretty good in a small role in the film. I'll do a later spoiler thing, maybe at the end of the review, because it's hard to talk about it. But it plays out as your typical late 80s buddy comedy, over the top. I was noticing at the beginning, there's a shootout at the beginning that's really well shot. It's well edited. Turns out that Mark Goldblatt, the guy who directed the movie, had edited things, everything from Ron Howard's Grand Theft Auto to working on movies like Terminator. He worked with James Cameron. He worked with Roger Corman. He was part of all that team that did all those movies back there in the late 70s and early 80s. So he finally, as he was an editor on many other movies at the time, got the opportunity to direct Dead Heat, knew that it was going to be a hard sell, a hard balance to do a horror comedy buddy cop movie. It's going to be difficult. It's hard. It's easier to do comedy or horror by themselves, but to put the two together, you just got to strike the right tone. There is a great brand new documentary with Mark Goldblatt on the Blu-ray that comes with a 4K release. You might want to watch that. It was really good. He's getting up there, but he remembers things clearly. He goes into great detail about the making of the movie, how they got it made, everybody on the set, how they were to work with, all that kind of stuff. It's very fascinating. There's some other behind the scenes, a lot of interviews. It really is a pretty amazing collection for a movie that didn't make $3.5 million in its original theatrical run. So as the movie progresses, there's more practical makeup effects. There's a little bit of special effects, again, from the guy who did Terminator. All the lightning ball effects from Terminator kind of reused here in a little slightly different way, but some of the elements were actually lifted from Terminator because it was the same special effects guy. Little things you learn on watching the extras on these Blu-rays and 4Ks. There is no extras on the 4K, and if you're interested in it, it's pretty spectacular. I don't know that the movie looked this good when it was originally out. It's bright, it's clear, there's a tiny little bit of grain, but this was restored in 4K from the original 35 millimeter film. It doesn't look like a brand new, it doesn't look like Top Gun Maverick, but it does look great for its age. There's almost no print damage, no banding, no blacks are not crushed. It really looks spectacular for what it is. The budget was $5 million on this movie, so temper your expectations. But a lot of practical makeup effects, and they show up very well in the 4K. There's some kind of time-lapse in-camera effects, optical effects, also very, very good for the time and for now. Some of the ad-lib jokes fall flat, but I've watched a lot of comedies recently where a lot of the movie falls flat. Joe Piscopo hits more than he misses. I got to say that. Treat Williams playing the kind of straight guy who has some of the funniest lines in the movie. He does very well with it. Lindsay Frost is pretty good. You know, it is what it is. It's a $5 million movie where everybody jumped into it. Everybody believed it, and everybody tried and looked like they were having fun on the set. If that sounds like your kind of movie, then check out Dead Heat. I don't know if it's still available on Hamilton Book. Your mileage will vary on the movie depending on how much you want to pay for it. It's not a $35, $40 movie for me, but it might be for you if this is your cup of tea. If you like B movies that were made with an A- list cast from the late 80s with all guys behind the screens had worked on bigger films, but also low-budget films, but movies that went on to do much better. The director and a few other people talk about the fact it's a shame that more people didn't see this. It was in theaters for about a week. I saw it in the theater. It opened in May of 1988, so I can only imagine the next couple of weeks the big summer blockbusters came in and just pushed it out of the theaters. But this was the kind of movie I liked back in the day. I was already a fan of things like American Werewolf in London, and I was looking for more horror comedies. Now, I'm going to get into a few spoilers here. I won't get heavily into it, but this will spoil some of the stuff that happens towards the beginning of the film. They find that these 3, 2, 1 spoilers. They find that these two guys in the beginning were kind of zombies. They were reanimated somehow. They had been autopsied before, and somehow somebody had resurrected them. And through the course of the action, Joe Piscopo and Treat Williams' characters run into the machinery used to bring those guys back to life. And unfortunately, Treat Williams' character dies during the shootout, and they bring him back to life. And that's kind of the whole fish out of water, dead or alive aspect of the movie, because he's only got so many hours that he's going to survive this resurrection process. And through the course of the movie, the makeup effects get more intense because he's starting to fall apart. And other people in the movie start falling apart. And the director said that it was gorier than what we see. It did earn an R rating, but they were told to cut it down, that it was gorier. And, you know, there's some body parts that fall off people and people's faces slide off and things like that. But it's not, you know, compared to today's standards, it's not horribly bloody, but there is some great and gory practical effects if you're into that. What gives you the clue of the cheeky nature of the movie and what it's all about is Treat Williams' character is named Roger Mortis. Yeah, let that one sink in. Roger Mortis. I guess rigor would have been too much on the nose. So anyway, it's a great 4K for what it is, especially for a $5 million film that didn't make its money back, that most people haven't seen. But it was surprisingly funny, entertaining. It's at like 87 minutes. It's very short. Doesn't overstay its welcome. Got some really great fights, shootouts, practical effects, decent acting. It moves at a quick pace. This obviously the director was an editor because it really does move. I was expecting it to be, well, you know, when you watch an 80s movie sometime, it's slow. It's a bit of a slog. This one's not. It keeps right on moving along. So check out Dead Heat. It's available now from Vinegar Syndrome on 4K and Blu-ray. You can probably find it on some streaming services. It's a 1988 American cop buddy zombie movie, comedy horror movie. Yeah, with Joe Piscopo. He bulked up. He was going for being an action star. Didn't really work, but, you know, he plays a Neanderthal in this movie, and it fits, and it fits right in there. It's a good buddy cop movie, and it's fine. Again, watching it now in 2023, it's much better than I remembered it. and looks great on this new 4K. So check it out. And I've got a lot more reviews coming up. Thank you very much for listening, spending time out of your day to take 10 minutes on this B movie from the late 80s. I hope it was worth it. Check it out sometimes. I'm Scott Hamilton. Thanks for listening. Have a spectacular day.